In 2026, something unusual is happening in the world of personal computing. And it's happening quietly, without flashy launch events or massive advertising campaigns. Millions of users around the globe are switching to Linux, not as a protest, not as a trend driven by influencers, but as a practical response to how computing itself has changed. This is not a loud revolution with banners and slogans. It's a silent migration, one user at a time, driven by frustration, curiosity, necessity, and a growing realization that the operating systems people have relied on for decades no longer serve them in the same way. To understand why this shift is happening now, we need to look at how the relationship between users and their operating systems has evolved, and why Linux suddenly feels less like an alternative and more like a logical next step. For many years, operating systems were invisible tools. You installed one, learned its quirks, and then forgot about it. It simply existed to run your applications, manage your files, and stay out of your way. But over time, mainstream operating systems began to demand more attention. Automatic updates started interrupting workflows. Hardware requirements grew heavier with each new version. Subscription models, telemetry, and online accounts became deeply embedded into the core experience. What was once a tool began to feel like a service, and eventually, like a platform you were merely allowed to use rather than own. By 2026, this tension has reached a tipping point. One of the biggest drivers behind the Linux migration is control. Users are increasingly aware that their computers are collecting data, reporting usage patterns, and nudging them toward specific ecosystems. In an age where digital privacy is no longer an abstract concept, but a daily concern, people are asking harder questions. Why does an operating system need to know so much about how I use my computer? Why can't I decide when to update? Why do features appear and disappear without my consent? Linux, by contrast, offers a radically different philosophy. It doesn't assume ownership over the user's machine. It doesn't force a single workflow or a single vision of how computing should look. Instead, it presents itself as a foundation, something you build upon according to your own needs. Another key factor is performance, especially on older or modest hardware. As global economic pressures continue into 2026, many users are holding onto their devices longer. Not everyone can justify upgrading their laptop or desktop every few years, especially when the hardware itself still works perfectly fine. However, modern mainstream operating systems have become increasingly resource-intensive. Background processes multiply, system requirements rise, and perfectly functional machines begin to feel slow and outdated. Linux, with its wide range of lightweight distributions, has become the go-to solution for breathing new life into aging hardware. A laptop that struggles under a heavy operating system can feel fast and responsive again after a Linux installation, and that experience leaves a strong impression. The software ecosystem has also changed dramatically. One of the biggest historical barriers to Linux adoption was application compatibility. People stayed with familiar operating systems because that's where their software lived. But in 2026, this argument carries far less weight. Web-based applications dominate many workflows, from document editing to project management to communication. If your primary tools run in a browser, the underlying operating system matters much less. At the same time, native Linux software has matured significantly. Creative tools, development environments, productivity apps, and even gaming have reached a level where Linux is no longer a compromise for most users. Gaming, in particular, has played an unexpectedly large role in this quiet revolution. For years, Linux gaming was considered niche, something only enthusiasts bothered with. But thanks to advances in compatibility layers, driver support, and platform investment, the gaming experience on Linux in 2026 is better than many ever imagined. A large portion of popular games now run smoothly, often with performance comparable to, or even better than other platforms. As gamers experiment with Linux and discover that their favorite titles just work, many begin to question why they ever needed to stay locked into a single operating system in the first place. Developers and technical professionals are another major group driving the shift. Linux has always been strong in server environments and development workflows, but now that strength is spilling over into everyday desktops. As more people learn coding, system administration, and digital skills, they naturally gravitate toward an environment that mirrors the systems used in the real world. Containers, cloud services, automation tools, and programming languages all integrate seamlessly with Linux. For students and professionals alike, using Linux on a personal machine feels like an investment in skills, rather than just a choice of software. There's also a cultural change happening. The stigma around Linux being too hard or only for experts is slowly fading. Modern Linux distributions offer polished interfaces, straightforward installers, and helpful communities. New users no longer have to memorize obscure commands just to get started. They can install Linux, browse the web, watch videos, attend meetings, and get real work done without touching the terminal if they don't want to. And when they do want to go deeper, the power is there waiting for them, not hidden behind locked settings or paper. Education plays a role too. In many parts of the world, schools and universities are adopting Linux to reduce costs and teach open standards. Students who grow up using Linux in classrooms carry that familiarity into their personal lives. By 2026, a generation of users exists who don't see Linux as strange or foreign. To them, it's just another operating system, one that happens to be free, flexible, and transparent. This normalization is critical because adoption is as much about perception as it is about technology. Another often overlooked reason for the Linux surge is stability. While no system is perfect, Linux has built a reputation for reliability, especially when configured properly. Users tired of unexpected reboots, broken updates, and system-wide issues are drawn to an environment where updates are predictable and reversible. The ability to choose when and how the system changes creates a sense of trust. Your computer feels like something you can rely on, not something that might surprise you at the worst possible moment. The rise of artificial intelligence and automation has also influenced operating system choices. Many AI tools, frameworks, and workflows are developed with Linux as the primary target. Researchers, hobbyists, and professionals experimenting with machine learning find Linux to be the most natural environment. Package managers, GPU drivers, and open-source libraries integrate more smoothly, reducing friction and frustration. As AI becomes part of everyday computing, the operating system that supports it best naturally attracts more users. Economics cannot be ignored. Linux is free, not just in price, but in licensing. There are no activation keys, no subscription tiers, no feature lockouts. For individuals, this means savings. For organizations, it means scalability and freedom from vendor lock-in. Small businesses, startups, and nonprofits are increasingly choosing Linux to reduce costs and maintain control over their infrastructure. When employees bring that experience home, the line between professional and personal computing blurs, and Linux becomes a familiar choice rather than a risky experiment. Security is another major concern shaping behavior in 2026. As cyber threats become more sophisticated, users are more aware of the risks associated with closed systems. Linux's open-source nature allows vulnerabilities to be identified and fixed quickly, often by the community itself. While no operating system is immune to attacks, the transparency of Linux inspires confidence. Users know that the code running on their machines can be inspected, audited, and improved, rather than hidden behind corporate secrecy. What makes this shift truly remarkable is how quiet it is. There is no single moment, no headline declaring the mass adoption of Linux. Instead, it's happening gradually, almost invisibly. A frustrated user installs Linux on an old laptop. A gamer tries it out of curiosity. A student uses it for class and keeps it afterward. A professional switches for work and never looks back. Each decision is small on its own, but together they form a powerful movement. Social media and online communities amplify this effect. When users share positive experiences, tutorials, and success stories, they lower the barrier for others. The fear of the unknown diminishes. People realize they're not alone, that help is available, and that switching doesn't mean giving up everything they're used to. In many cases, it means gaining something they didn't even know they were missing. Another subtle but important factor is customization. In a world where software increasingly feels homogenized, Linux stands out by allowing users to shape their environment. From desktop layouts, to workflows, to system behavior, everything can be tailored. This appeals to people who want their computers to reflect how they think and work, rather than forcing them into a predefined mold. Even users who don't customize extensively appreciate knowing that the option exists. As more hardware vendors improve Linux support, the experience continues to get better. Drivers are more reliable, firmware updates are more accessible, and compatibility issues are less common than ever before. This removes yet another barrier that once discouraged new users. Installing Linux in 2026 often feels surprisingly smooth, even on modern laptops and desktops. It's also worth noting that dissatisfaction with mainstream operating systems isn't always about a single issue. It's cumulative. It's the slow buildup of annoyances, restrictions, and changes that users didn't ask for. Linux becomes attractive, not because it promises perfection, but because it offers an alternative path. A way out of the feeling that your own computer no longer belongs to you. This quiet OS revolution is not about replacing one monopoly with another. Linux itself is not a single entity, but a diverse ecosystem of distributions, communities, and philosophies. That diversity is its strength. Users can choose what fits them best, whether that's a beginner-friendly system, a minimalist setup, or a highly specialized environment. There is no single right way to use Linux, and that openness resonates strongly in a time when many feel constrained by rigid digital platforms. By 2026, the question for many users is no longer, why would I switch to Linux? But why wouldn't I? The barriers have fallen, the benefits are clear, and the risks are lower than ever. Switching no longer feels like a radical act. It feels practical, even obvious. In the end, this movement is about agency. It's about reclaiming a sense of ownership over technology. It's about choosing transparency over obscurity, flexibility over rigidity, and community over control. Linux doesn't promise to solve every problem, but it offers something increasingly rare in modern computing: the ability to decide for yourself. And that is why millions are switching, quietly, steadily, and confidently. Not because Linux is perfect, not because it's trendy, but because in 2026, it aligns better than ever with what users actually want from their computers. The revolution isn't loud. It doesn't need to be. It's already happening, one install at a time. Reshaping the future of personal computing in a way that few could have predicted, but many now recognize as inevitable.